Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what might be one of the Bible's biggest puzzles, the first 5 chapters of 1 Chronicles. You know, it's that part that seems like an endless list of names. But what if I told you it's not a list at all? It's actually an epic story of identity, purpose, and a promise that was never broken. Right? It's a fair question. At first glance, it really does look like an ancient phone book. But these are not just random names. Think of them as a carefully drawn map. A map of identity, of legacy, and of divine promises, written for a nation that was trying desperately to remember who they were after being scattered and broken. Okay, so to make sense of this whole thing, we're going to use what I call a zoom-in approach. We're starting with the widest lens possible, all of humanity, and then we'll narrow our focus, generation by generation, right down to the key families that shaped the nation of Israel. So our story begins, well, at the very beginning. Chapter 1 isn't just a list. It's the author's way of anchoring the nation of Israel into the grand story of all humanity. It's about tracing a direct, unbroken line from the very first man all the way down to the patriarchs of their own nation. You see, this isn't just a boring list of names. It is a breathtaking sweep of history on a single slide. It's designed to show a divine hand moving through time, connecting the literal dawn of humanity directly to the nation of Israel through one specific, chosen lineage. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The narrative intentionally follows one specific path. The author, who we call the chronicler, he mentions Abraham's other sons, like Ishmael, but then immediately, boom, the focus is on Isaac, and then on his son Jacob, whose name gets changed to Israel. This selective focus is everything. It establishes a clear, undeniable path for God's covenant promises. All right, so now that we've arrived at the man named Israel, chapter 2 starts laying the foundation for the nation itself. The story zooms in again, moving from Israel's 12 sons to the one specific tribe that was destined to produce its kings. And here they are, the 12 sons of Israel. From this single man, a whole nation of 12 distinct tribes is born. Every single name you see on this list represents a family that would grow to become a core part of the nation's identity, each with its own land, its own story, and its own unique destiny. So while all 12 tribes are important, the chronicler doesn't waste any time. He immediately zooms in on Judah. Now why? It's simple. Because this is the line of the kings. The entire history that's about to unfold, the whole story of the kingdom, it all hinges on the descendants of this one man. And this is where we see that these genealogies are not some sanitized, perfect family tree. Not at all. They are brutally honest. Right at the start of Judah's royal line, we find a story of evil and divine judgment. This shows us that the history is real, recording the failures right alongside the heroes. This story is just a powerful reminder that individual actions have massive, massive consequences. Achar, whose name literally means troubler, is singled out in this lineage for a reason. His disobedience brought disaster on the whole nation, and his story is embedded here as a permanent warning. Your choices define your legacy. Okay, now the focus sharpens dramatically. After establishing Judah as the royal tribe, chapter 3 traces the single most important lineage within it, the direct, unbroken line of King David, the man to whom God promised an eternal throne. So, the list of David's descendants starts here, with the 6 sons born while he was reigning in Hebron. And this list isn't just about family, it's about politics. It establishes the foundation of his growing family, and really the legitimacy of his kingdom before he ever set foot in Jerusalem. So once David makes Jerusalem the capital, the political and spiritual heart of the nation, his family just explodes. And notice, right there in the middle of the list, Solomon is specifically highlighted as the son of Bathsheba. That is not an accident. He is the chosen heir, the one through whom God's covenant with David would continue. So, tucked inside the sprawling family tree of Judah in chapter 4, the author does something really interesting. He briefly pauses the endless list of who was the father of whom, and instead, we find these remarkable little stories, these vignettes of individuals whose faith and actions just break the molds and demand our attention. This is really the question chapter 4 is asking, and to answer it, we're introduced to a man named Jabez. His name literally means pain, because he caused his mother so much sorrow at birth. He was basically defined by this pain, but he absolutely refused to let that be his final story. And this is the famous prayer of Jabez. It's short, but it's an incredibly powerful cry to the God of Israel. He's basically asking to break the curse of his own name. He's pleading for genuine blessing, for more influence, for God's hand to be upon him, and for protection from the very evil and sorrow that had defined his life. And there it is, the powerful conclusion to his story. In a book just packed with names, the narrative pauses on this one man to show us that God hears and responds to individual faith. Jabez, through his prayer, literally rewrote his own legacy, transforming a story of sorrow into one of honor and divine blessing. All right, for our final section, the lens widens out again. Chapter 5 turns our attention to the tribes who settled east of the Jordan River. That's Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And their story, well, it serves as a powerful case study in potential, faith, and ultimately tragic failure. Reuben's story really illustrates a core theme of this entire book. As the firstborn, he should have had it all, the leadership, the double portion of inheritance, but because of a profound moral failure, his birthright was taken away. The lesson here is crystal clear. Legacy is not automatic. It is forged by character and obedience. But despite Reuben's failure, these eastern tribes were no pushovers, not at all. Together, they were a really formidable military force, boasting nearly 45,000 valiant men, all skilled and ready for war. They were united, they were powerful, a significant force in the early days of the nation. And we see their potential realized in this one incredible battle. They're facing the Hagarites, and right in the middle of the fight, what do? They cry out to God for help, and God responds, giving them a massive victory and an absolutely astonishing amount of spoils. 50,000 camels? It shows their greatest triumph came not from their own strength, but from their reliance on God. And the reason for their victory is stated with absolute clarity. The chronicler doesn't credit their military skill, he doesn't credit their numbers, he explicitly says they won because they trusted in God and because the war itself was aligned with God's purposes. But their story ends in tragedy. The very next verses tell us that they turned away from the God who gave them that victory. They transgressed, they chased after other gods, and when they did, that same impressive military might couldn't save them from being conquered and carried away into exile. Ultimately, these long lists in Chronicles aren't just ancient history. They're meant to be a mirror. They show us that no life is lived in isolation. We are all part of an unbroken chain. And so the question these names leave us with is not just what legacy will you leave, but maybe will your link in the chain be one of faithfulness that strengthens the future or one of failure that weakens it?